How can a quiet man in his 60s become a problem for a rich company and his own grown son? When my wife's rich boss called me after she passed away and told me I might be in trouble, I thought he only wanted to scare me. I had no idea he was really afraid of what my wife left behind with my name on it. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Leonard, and on that morning, I was trying to remember how to tie a tie without my hands shaking. It sounds simple. A bit of cloth, 2 loops, a pull, a straight line. I had done it hundreds of times when Sofia and I were younger. Back then, she used to stand behind me, fix the knot, pat my shoulder, and say that I looked like a real gentleman. Now I stood alone in front of an old mirror in our small hallway, staring at a tired face and a crooked tie. I told myself I only had to get through the day. I just had to stand there, listen, and say thank you. That was all. The iron hissed softly in the kitchen. I had left it on with the board set up near the table. My best shirt, a light blue one, lay over the back of a chair. I had ironed it twice already, but I kept seeing small wrinkles near the cuffs. I went back in, lifted the iron, and touched the fabric again, slow and careful. Sofia would have laughed at me. She always said I focused on the little things when I was nervous. She was right. In the lab at school, it was wires and labels. At home, it was shirts and notes. When I worried, I adjusted, straightened, checked again. I laid the shirt on the table and smoothed the collar with my fingers. On the placemat beside it lay a single page of paper, my speech, 4 short paragraphs written in my small, neat handwriting. I had written it the night before, crossing out lines until it sounded simple and honest. I wanted to thank her colleagues and her boss for helping with the memorial. I wanted to say she loved her work and that I had been proud of her. I read it again, slowly, lips moving without sound. Just then, I heard a car door outside, then fast steps up the front path. The bell rang twice in a row, sharp in the quiet house. It was Ryan. He never rang like that when we were going out for a coffee. That was his "we are late" ring. I opened the door. He stood there in a dark suit that fit him well, his hair styled, his phone in one hand. Behind him, the bigger car he and Megan leased sat shining in the pale sun. He looked me up and down in one quick scan. He told me I looked fine, but his eyes went straight to my tie and then to the shirt still on the chair in the kitchen. He stepped inside without waiting for an invite, reached for the spatch on the table, and read the first lines under his breath. He said it was sweet, but a little long, and that the company had already prepared something for today. He told me the communication team had written a proper tribute, and that it would be better if I just stood with Adrian by the flowers and smiled. He said people did not listen to long speeches in these events anyway. He folded the paper once and slid it into his suit jacket before I could answer. He said he would keep it safe for me. I tried to tell him that I wanted to say just a few words myself, but he was already walking toward the hallway, saying we needed to go if we did not want to make Adrian wait. I put on the blue shirt, even though my hands were stiffer now, and fixed the tie as best I could. In the car, Ryan talked about timing, guests, and key people from the company who would be there. I watched the streets move past the window and held the strap of my old bag with one hand. The company building rose high and clean from the concrete, glass catching the pale light. It was the kind of place where the doors slide open on their own and the air inside smells like strong coffee and new carpet. I always felt a bit too slow in places like that, as if everyone else had a plan and was walking 5 steps ahead. Inside the atrium, a small corner near the stairs had been turned into a memorial space. There was a standing picture of Sofia in a simple black frame, a few white flowers, and a table with candles in safe glass holders. The company logo shone above her head in the picture, big and bright. People stood around in clusters, holding cups or small plates. A few of Sofia's colleagues came up to Ryan first, shaking his hand, telling him how much his mother had done for the company. Some of them turned and nodded to me as if I were an extra detail in the corner of the room. One young woman, who I remembered from stories as the new assistant, told Ryan that Sofia had been like a second parent in the office. She thanked Ryan and Megan for sharing her with them for so many years. She did not look at me when she said it. Megan arrived in a hurry, perfume and bright lipstick, phone already in her hand. She squeezed my arm quickly and told me she knew today would be hard, but that I just had to let the company handle things. Then she moved toward a tall man in a dark suit who had just entered. Adrian Cole. I had seen him only a few times. Tall, fit, the kind of man who always seemed to know where every camera was. He shook hands, smiled, and moved through the crowd like a host at a big party. When he reached us, he squeezed my shoulder with both hands and said he hoped I was holding up. He said Sofia had been his right hand and that he wanted today to honor her in the best way. His assistant, a thin woman with a tablet, stood just behind him. She explained the order of the event to Ryan and Megan, not to me. First Adrian would speak, then Ryan, then a short video, then music in the background while people placed flowers by the picture. No space for my folded page tucked in Ryan's jacket. We moved toward a small raised platform near the picture. Adrian stepped up first and lifted both hands slightly. The general noise in the atrium settled. The sound of the coffee machine in the background was the only thing that kept going. He started to speak, and his voice filled the space. He talked about Sofia's long hours, her careful work, the way she knew every detail before he even asked. He said she had been the quiet center of the company. He said she had kept the building running from behind her desk. People nodded and smiled sadly. I stood near the front, just to the side, holding the stem of a single white flower so tightly that my fingers ached. Behind me, I could feel the eyes of strangers on the back of my head. Adrian said that in moments like this, family and company come together. Then he turned, looked past me, and invited Ryan to speak about his mother's legacy. Ryan stepped up, cleared his throat, and began. He thanked Adrian and the team for setting all this up. He talked about Sofia as a worker, as a planner, as someone who always kept lists and calendars. He said that at home, too, she had done everything serious because his father, meaning me, preferred to stay away from forms and signatures. He laughed a little as he said that I would sign anything if someone put a sticky note on it, and a soft wave of nervous laughter moved through the crowd. I felt my ears grow warm. The flower in my hand trembled. I did not look down. I stared at Sofia's photo instead. The picture was from one of the company dinners. She was smiling, wearing a blue dress. You could see light in her eyes. I wondered if she would have laughed at that joke too, and then told Ryan to be kinder when we were alone. I did not know. She was no longer here to say. Ryan finished his short talk, and there was polite applause. No one asked me to come up. The assistant moved to start the video on a small screen. Soft music played, and photos of Sofia at her desk, at events, with Adrian and other managers, moved across the monitor. After the video, people began to form a line to place flowers by the picture and shake Adrian's hand. A few of them came to me and said kind things, but most spoke to Ryan and Megan. A man from finance told Ryan that his mother had been a hero for the company. He did not call her my wife. He said she had been Adrian's best support. Near the end, Megan drifted toward Adrian again. I was close enough to hear without looking at them. She told him that Ryan and she wanted to help wrap up the paperwork so that I would not have to worry. She said I was already stressed and that it would be better if everything came through them. Adrian nodded thoughtfully and said they would set something up soon. I pretended not to hear. I walked over to the coffee stand at the side of the atrium. My hand shook slightly as I tried to pour, and a young employee in a company hoodie stepped forward to help. She gave me a small smile and said she was sorry for my loss. Then she turned back to her friend and whispered something. I did not mean to listen, but the words were not quiet enough. She said that Sofia's husband looked kind but harmless, like a gentle grandpa who would just do whatever they all told him. Her friend nodded and said that at least the company would make sure things went to the right place. I felt something settle in my chest then. Not a burst of anger, just a kind of quiet weight. It was the feeling you get when a picture finally comes into focus and you see what has always been there. After the crowd thinned, Ryan told me he had to stay a bit longer to speak with some people. Megan said she would ride home with him. She told me I should go back and rest. She said she would call in the evening to talk about next steps with the house. On the ride home in a company car arranged by the assistant, I sat in the back seat and watched the tall glass tower disappear behind me. I thought of Sofia's long evenings at her desk. I thought of the times she came home late with stories about events and meetings I never attended. I wondered how many of these people had ever heard my name before today. At home, the house felt even more quiet than in the morning. The iron still sat on the board, cool now. The place on the table where my speech had been was empty. I loosened my tie, sat down at the kitchen table, and let my hands rest flat on the wood. I told myself again that I only had to get through the day. Then the day would be over. The light outside faded. Street sounds grew softer. I sat like that for a long time, not moving much, my mind drifting between small details. The way Adrian had looked past me, the easy way Ryan had joked, the whisper near the coffee stand. I decided to make tea. The kettle's slow hum was a small comfort. I set the cup on the table and stared at the steam. That was when my phone, lying face down next to the cup, began to vibrate. The sound made me jump. It buzzed once, stopped, then started again. The screen showed an unknown number. I almost let it go, but then I remembered the assistant saying Adrian's office sometimes used different lines for private calls. I picked it up and pressed accept. A calm voice said my name. It was Adrian. He said he hoped I had arrived home safely. Then he told me that after the memorial, his team had gone through some internal files and that they had found something with my name on it. He said it could be a problem if it was not handled correctly. He asked me to come to his office the next day, early. He said this matter was better discussed face to face. Then his tone changed slightly. He told me that for now, I should not mention this meeting to Ryan or to Megan. He said it could cause confusion and that I could be in serious trouble if the story spread before it was fixed. When the call ended, I sat in the kitchen with the silent phone in my hand, the tea cooling beside it. Outside, a car passed, its headlights sliding across the wall. Inside, the only sound was the quiet tick of the clock. I looked at the dark screen of the phone and felt that same heavy clarity again. In the morning, I would go to Adrian's office. I did not yet know what he had found, but I knew one thing for sure. I would not walk in there as a harmless grandpa who signed anything put in front of him. That night after the call from Adrian, I did not sleep very well. I lay in the bed I had shared with Sofia for more than 30 years and stared at the dark ceiling. The room felt too large without her breathing beside me. The little blue light from the alarm clock made a soft square on the wall. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her picture in the company atrium and heard Ryan's small joke about sticky notes. I turned from one side to the other and tried to tell myself that I was worrying for nothing. Maybe Adrian had just found some old form with my name on it. Maybe it was a small mistake. I knew big companies had rules for everything. Maybe he only wanted to clear something up. But then I heard again the way his voice had changed when he told me not to tell Ryan or Megan. He had sounded smooth and kind at the start, like always. In the last part, he had sounded different, tight, as if he was speaking through his teeth. By 2 a.m, I gave up on sleep. I got out of bed, put on my old robe, and went down the hall. In the living room, the pictures on the wall watched me in the half-dark. One of them showed Sofia in our first small apartment. She was standing by a cardboard box with books, laughing at the camera. That was around the time we married. I had hair back then. I worked at the school lab, fixing broken projectors and checking chemicals. She worked at a small local office, answering phones. I remember how things changed when she got the offer from Adrian's company. It was almost 20 years ago. She came home with a sparkle in her eyes and told me that a friend had recommended her. She said the company was growing fast and needed someone who could handle many details at once. She said they needed a person who could keep a very busy boss on track. I told her she would be perfect for that. It was true. Even back then, she kept our lives organized. Bills paid, appointments set, Ryan's school trips all paid on time. She carried a small notebook everywhere. She moved over to that company, and at first we both saw it as a big chance. Her pay went up. There were bonuses, private health care. She came home tired but proud. She told me about big meetings, about investors, about new plans. I did not understand all of it, but I listened. Sometimes she would ask me to look at a form with her. She would say that they wanted her to take part of her pay as shares or to sign something for a savings plan. I was comfortable with forms. At the school, I had done safety checks and logs for years, so I would read them and we would talk. We signed the early ones together, sitting at the same kitchen table. At some point, things slowly turned. I did not notice the exact day. I just woke up one year and saw that Sofia was always working late, and when she came home, she was too tired to talk about details. She would say that Adrian's legal team had already checked everything. She would put a few papers in front of me, tap the sticky note where I should sign, and tell me that this was for our future. I trusted her. Of course I did. For most of our life, she had trusted me with money. I was the one who handled the bank visits and tax forms when we were young. So I told myself that this was just a change in who did which task. I still read some of the lines, but the words grew longer and more vague. Over time, I signed by habit. Thinking about that now, alone in my kitchen in the dark house, I felt a slow heat of shame in my chest. The young woman at the coffee stand had said that I looked like someone who would do whatever others said. Maybe she was not wrong, at least in those last years. I filled the kettle and made tea again. The soft light over the stove made a small circle on the counter. As the water heated, I remembered the first time I met Adrian at a company event. It was one of those big dinners in a hotel ballroom. Sofia had insisted that I come. She said it was good for him to see that she had a family standing behind her. I had worn my best suit and a tie she picked. When we arrived, everything felt shiny and loud. People moved around with small glasses and laughed too much at small jokes. Adrian came over with a group around him. He spoke to Sofia first, of course. He thanked her for all her work. Then he turned to me. He held out his hand and said my name, but he did not look straight at me. He looked somewhere near my forehead while he spoke. He said I must be proud of Sofia. I said I was. I began to say something about the school lab, about how her new job had changed our life. He cut in and said that Sofia had told him I worked with wires and old machines. He laughed a bit as he said it. He told the people around him that Sofia was the one who understood real business in her family. He said it kindly, as if it was a little joke. People around him smiled. I smiled too, because I did not want to make Sofia feel strange. But I remember how my throat had felt tight. Later that night, Sofia sat on the edge of the hotel bed and told me not to take it to heart. She said Adrian always spoke like that, fast and careless, and that he meant no harm. She said I should not focus on the exact words, only on the fact that he valued her work. I tried to do that. For many years I tried. When Ryan grew up and met Megan, things changed again. Megan liked stories about big plans. She followed business news and knew all the rich names. She thought the world Adrian lived in was impressive. She talked about him with bright eyes. When she saw that Sofia was close to him at work, she seemed almost proud, like it made our family more important. At family dinners, Megan would ask Sofia about company trips, about hotels, about meetings. She did not ask much about my work at the school. After I retired from the lab, it got even worse. I became dad who stays home in their minds. A quiet helper, a background piece. Thinking about all this, I realized that the pattern at the memorial was not new. It was just sharper now because Sofia was not there to stand next to me and balance the room. I carried my tea into the small room I called my office. It was really just the spare bedroom where I kept a desk and a metal filing cabinet. Sofia liked order, so she had always stored our important papers there. The blinds were half closed. The air smelled faintly of paper and dust. On the top of the cabinet, there were 3 short stacks of folders: savings, house, health. So far, I had only looked at the one for the house after she passed away. That night, something in me told me to look more deeply. I set the tea down on the desk and opened the top drawer. Inside, everything was arranged in neat lines. Sofia's handwriting was on small white labels. Old tax forms, bank letters, insurance. At the back, I saw a thinner folder I had never noticed before. The label was in the same hand, but in darker ink, as if she had written it more recently. The label said, Cole, Agreement, Private. Seeing Adrian's last name there made my chest feel tight again. I took the folder out and laid it on the desk. For a moment, I just looked at the cover. Then I opened it. Inside, there were not many pages. On the left side was a business card clipped to the cardboard. A name, Rachel Kim. Under that, the words for a law office I did not know. On the right side, there was one small sticky note. It had a date on it from a few months before Sofia passed away. Next to the date, she had written one short sentence in her careful script, telling me that if anything happened, I should call Rachel and take this folder. That was all. No long contract, no clear explanation, just that note, that date, and the card. Yeah, I stood there for a long moment, the folder open, one hand resting on the edge of the desk. I tried to think back. Had Sofia ever said the name Rachel out loud? Maybe she had. Maybe she had once mentioned a lawyer friend who helped her with something. The memory floated close, but would not settle. I put the card in my wallet and the folder in the middle of the desk where I could see it. Then I sat down at the old computer on the side table. It was the one Sofia had used for home spreadsheets and emails. I pressed the power button and waited as it woke up slowly. On the desktop, there was a folder with her name. Inside that, another set of folders: work, home, personal. I opened the calendar she had used. Her last year was full of blocks of color. Meetings, calls, deadlines. I scrolled back month by month. Near the date on the sticky note, I saw a small red circle on one day. When I clicked it, a short entry came up. It said, Meeting, Cole, Edgar, Rachel, trust update. I did not know what trust update meant in this context, not exactly. I knew what a trust was in a general way, of course, but I did not know how it connected to Sofia, or to Adrian, or to this Edgar person whose name I had never heard. I only knew that she cared enough to mark it in red. I sat back in the chair and rubbed my forehead. For years I had told myself that Sofia and Adrian lived in a world of complex plans that I did not need to fully understand. Now, looking at that little red circle on the screen and the thin folder on my desk, I felt that this world was just very late in knocking on my own door. My phone buzzed again on the desk next to the keyboard. This time it was not a call, but a short text. It came from a number I did not know, but the message was clear. It was from Adrian's assistant. She wrote that Mr. Cole looked forward to seeing me in his office at 9 in the morning to resolve the matter regarding the file in my name. She added a polite line saying that this was a private meeting and that I did not need to bring any family members. I looked from the message to the screen with the red circle, then to the folder with Sofia's label. I felt the weight in my chest again, but underneath it, there was something else now. A thin, firm line. A sense that I was walking into a room I should have entered years ago. I set the alarm, closed the laptop, and went back to bed. I still did not sleep much, but my thoughts were different. I began to sort them into small steps, the way I used to sort wires and screws in the lab. In the morning, I told myself I would keep my eyes open, I would listen, and I would not sign anything until I understood why my name sat on a folder with Adrian's. In the morning, the alarm rang before the sun was fully up. For a moment, I did not remember why it was set so early. Then the call from Adrian came back into my mind, clear and sharp. I lay there and listened to the faint hum of the fridge in the kitchen and the small sounds of the street starting to wake up. I swung my legs out of bed and sat for a minute with my feet on the floor. My knees felt stiff. I rubbed them with my hands and told myself that I just had to go there, listen, and keep my head clear. In the bathroom mirror, my face looked older than I felt inside. Deep lines around the mouth, gray at the temples. Sofia used to say that my eyes stayed young even when my hair did not. I looked into them now and tried to see what she had seen. All I saw was a man who had been too willing to trust other people's plans. I dressed slowly, the same suit as the day before, but a different shirt. I did not want to smell like yesterday's grief. In the kitchen I made coffee, but my stomach did not want it. I poured most of it down the sink and rinsed the cup. On the table lay the folder with Sofia's label and my old wallet with Rachel's card in it. I took the card out again, read the name, and put it back. I thought about calling her right then, before the meeting, but it was still very early. The law office would not be open, and I did not yet know what Adrian would say. I told myself I would listen first and then decide. I put the folder back in the drawer of the cabinet. I did not want to walk into the company with it under my arm. It felt like something I should keep in my own space until I understood more. When I stepped out into the cool morning air, the sky was just turning pale. The streetlights were still on. I locked the front door and walked to the bus stop. I saw my old car parked by the curb. It was not worth much, and I did not trust it for longer drives anymore. The bus would take a bit longer, but would be steady. On the ride, I watched people stare at their phones, headphones in, faces blank. No one looked at the older man sitting near the back window with his hands folded over a worn leather bag. I felt oddly grateful for the lack of attention. The bus stopped near the tall glass building. I got off and stood for a moment on the sidewalk, looking up. In the bright light of morning, the building looked even more clean and sharp. The windows reflected the sky. It was the kind of place that gave the feeling that nothing messy could touch it, even though I knew that was not true. I crossed the street and went down the ramp into the parking garage. The air there was cool and smelled faintly of oil and concrete. Lights hummed overhead. Cars sat in neat lines, some of them sleek and new. I followed the signs to the elevators. My footsteps echoed a little. The metal doors opened with a quiet chime, and I stepped inside. As the elevator rose, I watched the numbers light up. B2, B1, G, 1, 2, 3. It felt like being carried up into someone else's controlled world. When the doors opened on the executive floor, I stepped out and saw a hallway of glass and soft carpet. It was almost quiet, just distant sounds of phones and low voices. At the far end was a double door with frosted glass. The name Adrian Cole was on a silver plate next to it. I took a few steps toward it and then stopped. There was someone already standing in front of the door, Ryan. He leaned against the wall, dressed in another good suit, scrolling through his phone. When he heard my footsteps, he looked up, surprised for only a second. Then he greeted me as if it were the most normal thing in the world that he was there. He explained that Adrian had called him after speaking to me and had asked him to join the meeting. He said Adrian thought it would be better if the family heard everything together and if someone was there to help me understand the technical parts. He said it all in a reasonable tone, as if this was just good support. He did not seem bothered at all that Adrian had told me not to tell him or Megan about the meeting. He did not ask me whether that detail was true. A small knot formed in my stomach. I realized then that Adrian was already rearranging the truth to fit whatever story he wanted to tell. Before I could say anything, the doors opened. Adrian's assistant stepped out, smiled politely, and asked us to come in. She said Adrian was ready. The executive office was large and bright, with a wide window that looked out over the city. There was a long desk with neat stacks of paper, a couch in the corner, and a round meeting table near the window. On that table lay a slim folder and a few sheets spread out, with a pen placed exactly in the middle. Adrian stood by the window, hands in his pockets, looking out as if thinking about big things. When we entered, he turned and gave us a warm smile. He asked how I was holding up and said again that the memorial had been beautiful. He thanked Ryan for coming early. Then his eyes went to the table and the papers. His smile stayed on his face, but his jaw seemed a little tight. He gestured for us to sit at the table. Ryan took the chair closest to the papers. I sat opposite him, leaving space between my hands and the sheets. Adrian sat at the head of the small table, folded his hands, and began explaining. He said that after any staff member passed away, the company checked their files to make sure all loose ends were tied up. He said it was a standard internal process to keep things clean for legal and tax reasons. He said that when they looked at Sofia's file, they found something they had not expected. He slid one of the pages a bit closer so I could see the top. I saw my name printed there. I did not need to read the rest to know that this was serious. He said that some years ago, Sofia had arranged what he called a special holding structure for a block of company shares. He said that in this structure, I was listed as having control over them in certain situations. He added that this was unusual because, in most cases, shares held by key staff were handled only through the company plan. He did not say that Sofia had done anything wrong, but he used words like odd and not aligned with standard practice. He said that now, with the company preparing for a big external review, this strange structure could draw attention that no one wanted. Ryan leaned forward and asked Adrian to explain in simple terms what the risk was. Adrian said that external eyes might see this block of shares in my name and think that the company was hiding something or moving value out of the normal system. He said they would ask questions about why a retired lab technician from a school had control over an important package of shares in a growing tech company. When he said retired lab technician, he smiled in a soft way, as if he wanted to remind me and Ryan that this was all a bit too big for me. Then he explained his solution. He said that to keep things clean and avoid misunderstandings, they had prepared a set of simple documents. If I signed them, the shares would move back fully under the company's standard structure. He said it would be as if this special plan had never existed. He said this would protect everyone. Ryan nodded along while he spoke. Ryan added that this would make audits easier and would also be better for their future, meaning his and Megan's. He said that as long as everything stayed in the proper company system, inheritance and taxes would be smooth. I listened and looked at the papers, but I did not reach for them. Instead, I asked a simple question. I asked Adrian when exactly Sofia had set this structure up. He paused for a very small moment and then said it was a few years ago, when the company had been planning changes. He said the date was not important now, only the fact that the structure existed and that we could fix it. I thought of the red circle in Sofia's calendar and the meeting note with Adrian's name, Edgar's name, and Rachel's name. I knew at least one exact date was important. It might not be for Adrian, but it was for me. I asked another question. I asked why my name was on this if it was just a company matter. Why not keep everything under Sofia's name alone, or under some internal code? Adrian said that sometimes, to protect certain assets, they used trusted family members as a kind of shield. He said Sofia had wanted me to have this control on paper in case something happened. But he said again that this was not standard, and that times had changed since then. He said that now, having my name there could cause confusion. Ryan leaned in and placed a hand on my arm. He told me that I knew he and Megan only wanted the best for me, and that there was no reason to hold on to something that could cause trouble. He said he was sure Sofia had not meant to create a problem. He said the smart thing was to let the experts fix it. He reminded me in a light tone that I had never liked numbers and that long documents made my head hurt. He said I should just trust that they and Adrian knew what they were doing. I felt the old reflex rise up in me, the one that said it was easier to sign and be done. For years I had done that, sign where Sofia pointed. Trust that she, and later the company, had my good at heart. But now Sofia was gone, and the person asking me to sign was her boss, who had told me one story on the phone and another in person. My son was looking at me not as if I were a partner in a serious matter, but as if I were a slow student who needed simple instructions. I looked again at the papers. The print was small. I could have asked for my glasses. They were in my inside pocket. Instead, I let myself feel the weight of the moment. I remembered Sofia's small sticky note telling me to call Rachel if anything happened. I remembered the red circle in the calendar. I remembered Lydia's name, still just a faint idea in my mind as someone Sofia had liked and trusted at work. And I remembered the young employee at the memorial who had called me harmless. I realized in that second that everyone in this room thought they knew how I would act. They expected me to go along, to be grateful, to sign quickly because I did not want any trouble. Adrian slid the pen a bit closer to me. He said that time was important. He said the external review process was already moving. He added that if we delayed too long and someone outside noticed this strange structure, they would have to report it in a way that might place my name in the wrong light. He did not say exact words like blame or charge, but the idea hung in the air. Ryan squeezed my arm again and told me to sign now so we could all move on. He said that if I took the papers home, I would just worry and confuse myself. He said he did not want to see me stressed. I took a breath and let it out slowly. I heard my own voice as if from a distance when I answered. I said that I never signed anything without my reading glasses. That was true, even if I had broken that rule too often in the past. I said that my glasses were at home. That part was not true. They were in my pocket. But I let it stand between us like a small shield. Ryan frowned and reminded me that I had been reading small print the other day with no problem. Adrian smiled a thin smile and said he understood that forms could be hard for someone not used to them, but that was why they had brought Ryan in to help. I shook my head. I said that Sofia had always been careful with papers and that she would want me to be careful too, especially now. I said I would take nothing today. I said I would think, I would ask my own questions, and then, if everything was clear, I would decide. For a second, the room felt very quiet. The hum of the air system seemed louder. Ryan's hand fell from my arm. Adrian looked at me with a different expression then. The smile did not reach his eyes. He said that of course I had the right to think, but he repeated that time was short and that waiting could create complications. He hinted again that if this structure came up during the review in the wrong way, people might assume bad things about me and about Sofia's choices. I pushed my chair back slowly and stood up. I said that I would rather face questions with full knowledge than sign in fear. I told them that if something with my name on it existed in their system, then it was my duty to understand it before I agreed to any change. I added that I would be in touch after I had spoken to someone who could explain things from my side, not from the company's side. Ryan began to protest, but Adrian held up a hand. He said it was fine, that we would pause for now. He said he hoped I would not talk to too many people and cause noise before they had a chance to handle this smoothly. His assistant appeared at the door as if she had been listening for the right moment. She asked if I needed help finding the elevator. I said I did not. As I stepped out of the office, I heard Adrian's voice behind me, softer now, speaking into his phone. He told someone to ask the legal team to prepare another path in case I became difficult. He said they should review all options, including actions if the holder refused to cooperate. The elevator doors closed before I could hear more. On the ride down, I watched my reflection in the stainless steel. My hands shook a little, but not from fear. It was more like the tremble in a wire when a current first runs through it. For the first time in many years, I felt not only that something was happening around me, but that I had a part to play in it. When I stepped out of the building, the air outside felt different. It was the same city air as always, of course, with cars moving and people hurrying past. But inside me, something had shifted. For years, I had walked in and out of doors like this as the quiet person who waited where others pointed. Now, in a small way, I had refused to move according to someone else's hurry. I did not go straight home. I walked once around the block, slow, letting my heart settle. My hands still shook a little, but the feeling in my chest had changed. It was not the heavy shame from the memorial. It was something more firm. A quiet line, like a beam finally set straight under an old roof. When I reached the bus stop, I took out my phone. I opened Sofia's contacts list, which I had copied to my own phone after she passed. Most of the names were just first names to me. There were a few I recognized from her stories. One name caught my eye, Lydia P. I remembered Sofia talking about a Lydia in accounting who always stayed calm when numbers got strange. Sofia had liked her. She had once told me that if she ever had to check the company's soul, she would start with Lydia's spreadsheets. I hesitated, then pressed the number. It rang a long time. I was about to end the call when someone answered. The voice on the other end sounded cautious when she heard my name, then softer when I said I was Sofia's husband. I told her I did not want to trouble her at work, and that I only wanted to ask a few things about something with my name on it in the company's system. I kept it vague on purpose. She listened, and then suggested we meet somewhere that was not the office. She did not want to talk about this over the phone or under the company ceiling. She mentioned a small cafe near the building. I knew the street. We agreed to meet there after her lunch break. At home, I had just enough time to change my shirt and drink a glass of water. The kitchen felt less like a quiet box and more like a workspace now. I opened the cabinet, took out the coal agreement private folder, and slipped it into my bag with my notebook. I also added a pen and Sofia's old calendar printout with the red circle. Then I headed back out. The cafe sat on a corner 2 streets away from the glass tower. It was small, with warm yellow lights, and a bell that chimed softly when the door opened. The air smelled like coffee and pastries. People sat at small tables, talking in low voices. Lydia was already there when I walked in. She sat near the back, facing the door, as if she wanted to see who came and went. She was a woman around 50, with dark hair pulled back and simple glasses. She rose when she saw me, greeted me with a small nod, and said she was glad I had called. Her face had the tired look of someone who had been carrying numbers in her head for many years, but her eyes were sharp. We ordered coffee and sat down. I took a moment to thank her for coming. Then I told her, as calmly as I could, about Adrian's call, about the meeting, and about the papers with my name on them. I did not act like a victim. I simply laid out the facts, step by step, the way I would describe a problem with a circuit in the old lab. Something is here that should not be here. This person says it is dangerous. This is the solution he wants. This is how he spoke when I asked questions. Lydia listened without interrupting. Sometimes she lowered her eyes, as if matching my words to things she already knew. When I told her that Adrian had been more nervous than he wanted to show, she gave a small, dry smile. She said she believed that. When I finished, she told me something in return. She said that in the last months before Sofia passed away, there had been quiet tension in the accounting department. Not loud, but steady. There had been numbers that moved from one place to another without full explanation. There had been obligations promised to some people but not clearly recorded. She did not say anyone had done something clearly wrong, but she said that if an external group looked closely, they might ask many hard questions. She said Sofia had been worried about this. Sofia had come to her more than once, asking for old reports and copies of entries. She had asked Lydia how certain things could be protected if there was pressure from above. She had not given many details, but Lydia could feel her concern. At one point, Lydia said, Sofia had quietly asked her a strange favor. She had asked Lydia to keep copies of some records on a separate medium, not just on the company system. Sofia had said that if anything ever happened, there might be a time when someone outside the company would need to see clear numbers. Lydia reached into her bag then and took out a small object. It was a simple USB drive, plain and gray. She placed it on the table between our coffee cups. She told me that Sofia had given it to her in a sealed envelope with my name written on it. Sofia had said that if anything happened to her, and if I ever came asking questions, Lydia should give this to me. She said she had waited since then, wondering if she would ever see me walk through that cafe door. I looked at the small drive. It did not look like much, just a bit of plastic and metal, but I felt the weight of it in the air, as if it were heavier than the table itself. I asked Lydia what was on it. She said she had never opened it, because Sofia had told her not to. She said she had her own copies of certain reports at work already, and that this one was meant for me and someone I trusted. She thought Sofia had wanted a copy that existed entirely outside the company network. I picked up the USB drive and turned it once between my fingers. I slipped it into my shirt pocket and thanked Lydia. I told her I did not yet know what I would do, but that I would treat this with the care it deserved. She leaned closer then and lowered her voice even more. She told me that there were rumors about a coming check from outside investors, that Adrian had been nervous for weeks. She said that anything that did not fit the clean picture he wanted to show would be seen as a risk. She said a block of shares in my name, tied in some way to older numbers, would be exactly such a thing. She said Sofia had been very clear about one thing. If I ever felt pressured at all, I was never to sign anything until I spoke to a certain lawyer. She asked whether I had heard the name Rachel Kim. I nodded and showed her the card. Lydia looked relieved. She said I should go to Rachel as soon as possible, bring everything, and let her explain the legal shape of this situation. She said I should also write down every call, every visit, every message from Adrian and from my own family where they pushed me about documents. She said that sometimes pressure told its own story. When we parted, she squeezed my hand once, quickly. She said that Sofia had always believed I would handle things with calm and care if forced to. She said Sofia had trusted my slow way of thinking more than I trusted it myself. Out in the street, the day seemed a little less bright. Clouds had moved in front of the sun. I walked to the bus with my hand over my shirt pocket, feeling the small rectangle through the fabric. Back home, I went straight to the small office. I closed the door and sat at the desk. I took the USB from my pocket and placed it next to the Coal Agreement private folder. I also put Sofia's calendar printout there and my notebook. Then I opened the notebook and began to write. I wrote the date and time of Adrian's first call, the words he had used, the way his tone had changed when he told me not to tell Ryan and Megan. I wrote about the meeting in his office, who had been present, what was on the table, what the paper said at the top, and the exact phrases he had used about complications and external eyes. I wrote about Ryan's hand on my arm and about his reminder that I did not like numbers. When I finished, I had 3 pages of plain facts. No drama, no feelings, just events. Looking at them, in my own handwriting, I felt steadier. I understood now why Sofia had kept logs of everything. There was power in a clear record. In the afternoon, I called the number on Rachel's card. A receptionist answered and asked my name. When I said it and added that I was Sofia's husband, there was a short pause. Then she said that Rachel would want to see me as soon as possible. She offered a time the next morning. I accepted. The next day, I took the bus again, this time to a different part of the city. Rachel's office was in a smaller building, Not as shiny as Adrian's tower, but clean and solid. The lobby smelled faintly of paper and polished wood. Her office itself was simple. Shelves of folders lined the walls. There was a big table in the middle and 2 chairs facing each other across it. A window looked out over a quiet street with trees. Rachel came in with a folder in her hands and a thoughtful expression on her face. She greeted me by name and said she had been sorry to hear about Sofia. She told me that she and Sofia had worked together on some planning a while back and that she had liked her very much. I put my bag on the table and took out everything. Sofia's labeled folder, the calendar printout, my notebook with the notes of Adrian's calls, and the small USB drive. Rachel listened as I told the whole story again, from the memorial to the meeting in the executive office to my talk with Lydia in the cafe. She did not rush me. Sometimes she wrote a word down, sometimes she looked up sharply when a detail connected with something she already knew. When I finished, she opened Sofia's folder and took out the single sticky note. She checked the date and nodded slowly. She said that on that week, Sofia had come to her office with Adrian and Edgar, the board chair. They had discussed a special trust structure. She said Sofia had insisted on added protections that went beyond what Adrian had first proposed. Rachel explained in simple terms that Sofia had created a trust where certain company shares were set aside with me as a key decision holder. She said there was a clause written into it, which Sofia had called a respect clause in private. Rachel called it something more technical, but she translated it for me. She said that if anyone with power over Sofia's work, including Adrian or people in my own family, ever pressured me to give up this control in a way that felt wrong or rushed, then I would be allowed, even required, to move the shares in a different direction under her guidance. She said that if the company tried to hide connected obligations, other measures would start. I sat there, letting her words sink in. I realized then that Sofia had not left me a puzzle by accident. She had drawn a map and placed me at the center of it. Rachel told me we needed full copies of all the trust documents and related records before we made any step. She said she could pull them from her own system, but she also wanted me to keep my own copies. She suggested that for now, I should not answer any calls from Adrian about signing. If he called, I should note the time and his exact words in my notebook. She said that the pattern of pressure I had already described might be just as important as the text of any agreement. Then she stood, walked to a large printer in the corner, and began tapping on the computer beside it. A moment later, the machine came to life with a low whir. Thick sheets began to roll out, one after another, with Sofia's name and mine and various codes at the top. The sound of the printer filled the small office, steady and growing, as if the documents Sofia had set in motion long ago were finally stepping into the light. By the time the printer stopped, there was a thick stack of paper on the tray. Rachel gathered the pages neatly and placed them in front of her. She ran a finger down the top sheet, reading a few lines to make sure everything was there. Then she looked up at me with a calm, steady face. She explained that these were full copies of the trust and related instructions that Sofia had set up. She said she would keep one complete set in her office and that another set should go into a safe place at my home. She did not go into every detail yet. She said it would take time to walk through it slowly, and she did not want to rush that. For now, she wanted me only to understand the general shape. She said in clear, simple language that Sofia had done something clever. The shares were not just floating in my name like a loose object. They were inside a structure that had rules. One of those rules said that if I felt pushed in any wrong way, the control over those shares could move away from Adrian and his direct control and be used in a way that protected other people in the company and me. She added that Sofia had insisted on one more thing. If there was pressure on me from family members, especially about signing things fast or giving them control, that pressure would also count as a signal. In that case, I would be allowed to make changes that did not give them direct power over anything. Rachel said that this was unusual. She had seen many cases where people with money tried to protect themselves. She had seen fewer where a client tried to protect a quieter partner and a group of workers at the same time. She said Sofia had been very clear about who she trusted to act with care when the time came. She meant me, but when she said it, I found it hard to meet her eyes. I was still getting used to the idea that Sofia had trusted me with something so heavy. Rachel told me that now the most important thing was to stay calm and organized. She said we had to do 3 things in the coming days. First, she would send formal requests for any internal company records connected to the trust that were not already in her files. Second, I would keep logging every contact where Adrian, Ryan, or Megan tried to push me about forming or signing any new document. Third, we would prepare some steps of our own, changes to my personal will and letters connected to the trust, so that if we needed to act, we would be ready. She said we did not need to show any of this to anyone yet. It was better to move with quiet steps. When I left her office, I carried a slim folder with selected pages. It felt strange to know that a few sheets of paper could change how much power someone like Adrian had over his own company. It felt stranger to know that my name, which people treated like a small, soft thing at the memorial, was printed in those lines as a key. The next days at home were not peaceful. Ryan and Megan called often. At first, they sounded warm. They asked if I was sleeping, eating, managing. Then they began to bring up practical matters more and more. One evening, they invited me to their house for dinner again. Megan said it would be a simple meal, just family, and that we needed to talk about the next steps. I had learned to be careful when she used that phrase. Their home was modern, open, full of light and smooth surfaces. The dining table was long and pale, with straight chairs and small decorations that looked expensive. A large screen on the wall showed a silent news channel when I walked in. The table was already set. Ryan stood at the kitchen island, stirring a pot. Megan moved around placing plates of food. She greeted me with a quick hug and said she hoped I had brought my patience because there were boring papers to talk about after we ate. We had the meal first. The talk stayed on simple topics: weather, Ryan's work, a neighbor they did not like. I answered when spoken to and watched them move around each other with practiced ease. They were a team in many things. I knew that. I also knew that when they saw me, they saw someone they needed to manage. After dessert, Megan cleared most of the dishes and then came back with a thin folder. She placed it on the table in front of me, as if it were another serving dish. Ryan sat down on my right, leaving me no open space on that side. Megan said that she and Ryan had spoken to a friendly lawyer recommended by someone at her work. She said this person had said that it would make things easier if I signed a simple paper that would let Ryan or her sign on my behalf for anything connected to Sofia's shares or savings. She used the phrase power of attorney, but she said it in a light tone, as if it were just a helpful little shortcut. She said this would take stress off me. She said I had been through enough and should not have to sit in offices reading small print. She said that with this paper in place, they could act fast if any urgent thing came up and that nothing would be done without my knowledge. Ryan supported her. He said that I had always trusted them and that this was just a formal way to show that trust. He said he knew I had never liked forms and that this would keep me from getting lost in them. He made a little joke about me and my reading glasses. I looked at the folder without opening it. Then I took out my notebook and, without haste, wrote down the date and the time. I wrote that we were at their dining table and that Megan had placed a folder in front of me with a certain title. I wrote that they suggested I sign. They watched me write. I could feel their surprise. They were not used to seeing me record things. Ryan asked what I was doing. I answered calmly. I told them that I had spoken to my own lawyer and that she had advised me to write down every important moment where people talked to me about documents. I said that this helped me remember and avoid confusion. Megan's smile faded a little. She asked in a careful tone why I needed my own lawyer when the company had good people and when they had now found someone as well. She asked whether I did not trust them. I told her that trust did not mean I had to act without information. I told her that Sofia had once said that if things ever became complicated, I should not try to carry them alone. I said that I was following her advice. Ryan sighed and leaned back. He said he felt hurt that I had not asked him before going to see someone. He said that as my son, he should have been the first person I turned to. He said that this made him feel like I saw him as an outsider. I listened and then told him that I loved him, but that this was not about feelings alone. I said that when people who cared about me also stood to gain or lose money depending on what I signed, it was better that someone without any personal interest helped me understand. I could see the conflict in his face. Part of him knew that what I said made sense. Another part resented me for saying it out loud. Megan changed tactics. She said that if I did not want to sign tonight, that was fine, but that everything was moving quickly. She said if I waited too long, there might be forms I could not change later. She repeated that their lawyer had said this was the easiest way to protect my interests. I told her that I would not sign that night, or any night, without Rachel reading whatever they gave me. I said that if they wanted me to consider this paper, they should send it to Rachel's office first. Silence sat on the table between us for a long second. Then Megan closed the folder with a sharp little motion and took it back. She said that if I would not trust them to handle things, they would have to think about what that meant for future care. The word care hung in the air like a soft threat. I stood and thanked them for dinner. I said I would always be ready to talk, but that I would not be rushed. When I left, Ryan walked me to the door. He did not hug me. He said he hoped I understood that I was making everything harder than it needed to be. On the way home, I wrote his exact words in the notebook as well. The next day, I went back to Rachel's office with an even clearer sense of what Sofia had wanted to protect me from. I told Rachel about the dinner, the folder, the words used. She wrote short notes of her own. She said the pattern she was seeing was very useful. It showed pressure not just from Adrian, but from people close to me. Then we moved to the next step. We met at a small meeting room inside a bank building, the kind of neutral space with glass walls and a long table where people signed important things. The walls were plain, the chairs were stiff but solid. A clerk brought in a file, checked my identification, and then left us alone. Rachel laid out a few documents. These were not Adrian's papers. These were ours. She explained them one by one. One was an update to my personal will. It made clear that any part intended for Ryan and Megan would not pass directly into their hands if they tried to push or take control. Instead, it would sit in a fund for my grandchild with clear rules. Another document was a letter connected to the trust, ready to move shares in a particular direction if certain triggers appeared. Rachel did not force me. She walked through each line slowly, answered my questions in simple terms, and waited. When I understood and agreed, I signed. The pen felt heavier than usual, but in a good way. I knew this time exactly what each stroke meant. After that, we went together to the courthouse building. We did not go into a courtroom. We only stood in the lobby while Rachel handed sealed envelopes to a clerk at a window. The clerk stamped them, entered something on a screen, and placed them in a tray behind the counter. Rachel told me that this step meant that certain things were now on record in a way that could not be quietly undone. She said we did not need anyone else's permission for that. It was simply my right. In the days that followed, Adrian called again. This time, when he invited me back to his office, I accepted, but I went in with a different posture. The second meeting with him was shorter. He repeated that there was urgency. He hinted again that outside questions could fall on my shoulders. I listened quietly, asked a few very simple questions, and did not argue. I did not say what Rachel and I had done. I let him talk more than he should. When he asked again if I would sign the forms, I said I was still thinking and that I would not move without my lawyer's advice. I watched his face as I said the word lawyer. There was a tiny twitch near his eye. He tried to sound relaxed. He said he was sure we could all find a solution that would keep the company safe and satisfy any outside eyes. He asked me not to talk to anyone inside the company about this in order to avoid what he called unnecessary noise. I nodded as if I agreed. Then I went home and wrote down his words in my notebook. A week later, an email came from the company. It was formal, with the logo at the top and careful language. It invited me to a special town hall and memorial segment for Sofia Brooks in the main boardroom. It said Adrian would speak about new company plans and also honor Sofia again in front of key staff. It said he would welcome a few words from me as well. I read the email 3 times. I thought of the wide room, the large screen, the rows of seats. I thought of phones in people's hands, cameras in the corners, the board members, the middle managers, the younger staff who had called me harmless. Rachel and I met one more time. She showed me that certain steps were now fully in place, waiting. She said that if I chose to speak at that town hall, I would not have to raise my voice. The documents would speak for me. She reminded me that the trust and the recorded pattern of pressure were no longer just ideas in her office. They were now tied to real actions filed in real systems. On the morning of the event, I dressed carefully. Not the old suit this time, but a better one I had used only once at a wedding years ago. I polished my shoes until they shone. I took the slim folder Rachel had prepared, with only a few key pages and a short letter in Sofia's handwriting. On the bus, I sat near the window and watched the city move by. My hands were calm around the folder. I felt nervous, yes, but it was a clean kind of nervous, the kind you feel before pressing a switch you have tested many times. When I reached the glass tower, I walked in through the front doors. The lobby was busy, but an assistant saw me and came over at once. She led me to the elevator and pressed the button for the floor where the boardroom was. As the doors opened, I stepped into a wide corridor. At the end of it, a set of double doors stood open. Inside, I could see rows of chairs, a large screen with Sofia's face on it, and a long table where Adrian and other leaders sat. People were already in their seats. The low murmur of voices filled the air. I walked toward the room, holding the slim folder under my arm. As I crossed the threshold, the talking slowed. Somewhere near the front, I heard the soft click of a phone as someone started a recording. Adrian opened with smooth lines about growth and legacy, then turned to me, expecting a soft thank you. I read Sofia's notarized note, named the trust, and calmly explained that pressure on me had already triggered its protection clause. Edgar stood, announced a board review of Adrian's position, and watched as security walked him out while I left in silence.